You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for March 4th, 2025, and I am JD Duran, and I am co-hostless for this conversation because Brendan was not able to see the film, and it was kind of a last-minute thing, which left me on my last breath trying to find someone to fill in, and thankfully we have some great writers over at InSession Film who not only do great work for the website, but are also willing and able to fill in here on very short notice. So I'm really glad to bring on to the show the great Zach Youngs, who writes for us at InSessionFilm.com. Zach, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, thanks, JD.
Yeah, how are you doing? Everything's well? I hope you're not on your last breath.
It's a fascinating one, I think. I think we're going to have a lively discussion about it.
Yeah, I'm very excited to get into it. Before we do, though, I've been meaning to tell you this for a long time. And I feel like now is the perfect opportunity. Absolutely perfect. This could not have worked out any better. Because Zach is not on Twitter. In fact, I don't think he has much social media. And I am extremely envious of you. I am so jealous of you. I can't quit. I don't know why. And I feel like I should, because you have been spared some of the dumbest discourse I've ever seen around Nora. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. Probably not, since you're not there. But your mental health is way better than most of us, especially me. And I just want to say, what you're missing right now, it is truly something to behold. I can't even begin to explain to you how dumb it is. It's just so ridiculous. And look at you. You're over there. You're smiling. You look great and happy. And that's what I want in my life. So my life right now is to be you. That's what I'm trying to say here. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. We can talk about Last Breath. Before we get into it, though, were you familiar with the story at all? Had you seen the documentary that this was kind of based on, which is based off of a real event, of course? How familiar were you with this story?
I wasn't familiar at all with the story. I hadn't heard of the documentary. It just kind of, I think I saw a trailer for it and went, oh, okay, that looks all right.
Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly there with you. I had not seen the documentary, did not know much about this story. I did, admittedly, before the film began, I did watch a little video to kind of get the basis of what I was walking into, because I had absolutely no idea what this was about. So I knew a few facts, and that was about it. I went in mostly blind as well. So I am curious to get into this. So without further ado, let's talk about Last Breath. This is directed by Alex Parkinson. It stars Woody Harrelson, Simu Liu, Finn Cole, Cliff Curtis, among others. If you're not familiar with this movie, it is this true story that follows seasoned deep sea divers as they battle the raging elements to rescue their crew mate trapped hundreds of feet below the ocean surface. All right. With that said, let's get into it. Zach, what did you think about Last Breath?
I thought it was a pretty solid movie for the most part. It kind of reminded me of what studios used to put out at this time of year. Just kind of that very middle of the road, something that like anybody could go see without having to know anything about it, and kind of just enjoy it for what it is, because it's not trying to be something new and groundbreaking, but it's still a pretty good story.
Yeah, no, I am right there with you. I think this is going to end up as one of the better dad movies of the year. Yeah. Look out for this on TNT coming out in just a few months, because that's where it's going to live and people will go and see it. And I did really like it. I do like it a lot. It is breathtaking pun intended, I guess, in many respects. I do like a lot of the filmmaking here, especially the underwater scenes, I think
Yeah.
are really fantastic. The writing is perhaps expectedly, it is a bit thin. It does struggle to balance character with action. However, when it's just showing us what happened, kind of acting as a pseudo live action documentary, it is pretty riveting. The tension is pulsating. I love the underwater camera work, the way it demonstrates the heroism of the characters involved, what they had to do in order to get this man who was trapped, hundreds of feet below the ocean surface there, to try to get back to him. I do really like that a lot. It is certainly movie-ish at times, again, maybe expectedly so, but when you remove some of those contrivances, I think the film is pretty gripping, and I enjoyed myself more than I thought it would walking into it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think too that helps that they got such good performers as well. Like Woody
Mhm.
Harrelson is playing kind of an archetype character, the kind of guy
Mhm.
that always joking around, but also knows exactly what he's doing.
Mhm.
And then you got Simu Liu, who's doing the kind of tough guy with a quiet streak, but
Yeah.
who's also just wants to do their good job and wants everybody to come home safe, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And it's just really like fun to watch those two interact because of the straight man and the funny man kind of
Yeah.
interaction they have.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The archetypes are, in this case, while you can certainly criticize that, it is helpful because there really isn't too much to these characters. We don't really get to know them much as individuals. So much of this movie is emphasizing the event itself and trying to save Chris, as we noted. So giving us those tropes that are familiar certainly lets the audience, like easily navigate the personalities that are involved here. So I do think that works in favor of the film. And also one element of the writing that I did appreciate as well, and it's why I wanted to note that I did look into the film briefly before getting into it, because one thing I do like about this film is that it doesn't really give us a whole lot of exposition
Mhm.
as to how much of this functions. There is a little bit at the beginning of the film, but you see these characters, they're on the boat, that's easy enough. And then they live in these giant tanks. And there is a line of dialogue that pseudo explains why they're in those tanks. I do think it's easy to miss. And if you do miss it, you're not necessarily going to understand why they're in those tanks if you don't know much about that world. And
Yeah.
admittedly, knowing that piece of information beforehand uh, helped me digest this film a little bit. But I say that as a praise because I think oftentimes these movies can get bogged down in trying to explain what this world is and how it works. And that can maybe, congest the movie a little bit, where here they don't really explain much of how this works. We just kind of get into it and you just kind of catch up as you go, which I did appreciate. And maybe that's kind of the documentary background of Parkinson a little bit. I don't know. He didn't really write this film. I think, well, he did in some co-writers, I guess. But um, yeah, I don't know. Like that approach, I think fosters, some gripping tension when it comes to the underwater scenes because it just kind of treats it as a documentary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very much a show don't tell kind of movie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they give you everything that you need to know. They're just not giving you word salad at the same time.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of refreshing in that way of like there's no overused jargon. There was a few times where, especially when they were on the ship, where they kept referring to a guy as DPO, and so I had to look that up later, and I forget now too, because it's such an innocuous term. But basically, that's the guy that runs this particular part of the ship that's malfunctioning, and so you kind of get that as context already.
Yeah. I agree. Or another element of the ship is the bell, which is this rig that the three of them get into that kind of lowers them into the water. That is not explained at all in this film. And again, it's one of those things, if you go and watch, I presume this is in the documentary, I saw a short little YouTube video about it where they explain further what the bell is and how it works within the context of the ship and the job that they're doing specifically. But I do love that the film just doesn't explain that. Like, it just, you see it, you catch up with it, and you figure it out as you go. But and that's what they call it. They call it the bell. And it's like, okay, well, what is the bell? How does the bell work? And eventually the film just kind of shows you all of that without having to tell you. And I appreciate those little elements here.
For sure. And I liked too that it kind of kept the cast separate. Like it gave them a little bit more of a pun intended breathing room of like being away from these this different action on the surface of the water versus the action under the water, and kind of kept that separation much better than if they had tried to do something split screen or something like that with it.
I agree. And it's interesting how the film kind of fuses its docu-style with it also being this tense thriller as well, in the sense that the scenes when they're on the boat and we're in the rig in like the little command area, and there's the captain, there's other individuals kind of helping, with the ship or whatever. I do love how the film kind of intensifies the film by focusing the camera on these characters, their reactions to what's happening. And you do see them almost in a real-time sense trying to find some sort of solution to this. And again, it pseudo explains how the ship works, but it doesn't get into detail because they can't just, drop an anchor. And I guess there is a scene where they do kind of talk about the risk involved with doing that, which is why they don't. And so the boat works on, with this GPS system that malfunctions. Again, I had no idea about any of that going into this movie, but it does explain it enough that you're able to understand what's going on. And I think the film does a great job of fusing the facts of what's at play with the dramatic urgency of this story as well. And so you get these really incredible movie-ish, but still compelling, like heroic moments as these individuals desperately do everything they can to get to Chris. And I don't know, like, it's obviously there's a lot about this style of filmmaking that is not reinventing the wheel by any means, but I don't know. I still found myself on the edge of my seat. Like, I was enjoying it, and maybe that is just the dad in me coming out. I don't know, but I had a great time with it.
No, it certainly is. And I used in my written review the term, I don't know if I came up with this, but I just called it a manly tearjerker, kind of that. It's a bunch of dudes, like there's a few women, but it's a bunch of dudes just getting together and finding a solution to something. And they're like really working hard at this. Like that's the most interesting part, is the tension doesn't come from, somebody going, well, I don't believe that that'll work. It's, hey, go do that. Let's see if it works. Or like, and then while he's doing that, you do this, and we'll try to combine it all together.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how a lot of it functions. It's just them. There's really no arguing between the characters. There's no disbelief. There's just a lot of, what do we do here? Like they feel like their hands are kind of tied, but they're also acting and trying to figure things out as they go. I mean, really the only conflict we ever see there in the bridge, and I'm not sure of the character's name, forgive me, maybe you can recall, but the character that is operating the remote vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an element to the vehicle where if they grab Chris, like if they're able to anchor onto him, they can maybe pick him up and bring him to the ship. But the young sailor there is he's hesitant because
Yeah.
you're talking about someone's life. So then another person has to come in and do that. But again, that's not really conflict between those two characters as much as it is a young man, you know, it's a life and death situation and he doesn't want to make it worse by his own hands. And that's understandable. And what I love about that is it's all in the performance.
Yeah.
Like there's no writing to convey that internal conflict. It's just all there in the performance, which is great.
Yeah. And they don't even narrate that part either. Like there's just a
Yeah.
guy working on the robot trying to figure it, and then a bunch of reaction shots on top of
Yep.
that.
Mhm.
And it really works for that
Yep.
way, because they're not bogging it down with anything. It's just this tension of trying to get him, and kind of when I wouldn't want to call it fail, but when they realize that they can't do it that way, they don't wallow in it. They say, okay, what's
Mhm.
next?
What's next? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's really great. So, yeah, I love how whatever hurdles they have to come across or are organic to the moment, and from what I can tell, true to the to kind of the real life story there. I mean, some of it is absolutely contrived. They have to movie it a little bit, especially near the end.
Mm.
There's some liberties they take, but like I think this is a film where the liberties it's taking is in service of this story and how crazy it is, and trying to tell it to us visually. Like, for example, when Chris is first stuck there on the sea floor, the reality of it is it is pitch black.
Mhm.
He has no idea where this underwater rig is that he's supposed to climb up to. And almost by pure luck, he was able to find it in the dark.
Yeah.
In reality, you can't do that on camera. We have to be able to see what's happening there.
Yeah.
So they do kind of contrive it a little bit. So he has these underwater flares, and it gives the film this wonderful red hue that illuminates under the water so we can see the character and what he's doing. And there's still confusion. There's still a little chaos with the character. And that's the kind of manufactured filmmaking that I love. And because there's such a pragmatic component to the filmmaking there are elements of this film that visually look really good, greater than probably a lot of blockbusters we're going to get this summer, which is, I don't know, a little saddening, but
Yeah.
the reality of where we are now in Hollywood, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't really look into it, but it felt like, a lot of the underwater scenes felt practical. Like a lot of
Yeah.
what they were doing was actually in a tank and actually underwater. So
Yep.
it really felt heightened in that way.
Yeah.
Because that these guys are battling this water, and battling kind of this extra element to their performance and to their stunts.
Yeah. And I presume that it is practical because there is a credit for underwater DP. Like there
Okay.
was a whole director of photography credit just for the underwater scenes. So that suggests to me there is a practicality to what they were doing,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
I don't know either. It's utterly fascinating too to watch those scenes underwater and kind of have that idea, especially when he's running out of air. Because I'm always an empathetic audience person, so I start to like get shallow breaths and stuff like
Oh
that. And
yeah.
think about it, but in addition to that, the sound really
Yeah.
held it too. Like especially when the character Dave, who Simu Liu plays, when he says, "Hey, your line's about to break," and like he tries
Yeah.
to say something, and then the line breaks, and you just hear silence because that's what you would
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
L crushing down onto that
Mhm.
structure that he's on, and just making that earth-shattering sound.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and really, really well done.
No, I completely agree. That is a really great point because when they're underwater, the sound design there I think is really great. Underratedly, I think Paul Leonard Morgan's score is pretty thrilling as well, adds to the tension of the film. But that is a moment where the sound design wonderfully counteracts what we're seeing on screen, right? And once that's severed, it does get quiet. There's that jolt of, oh my God, this just happened. And then it's immediately followed by a moment of Woody Harrelson, his character back in the bell, trying to ring up the line. And then once he does, again, it's still mostly pretty quiet here, but you just get the severed line of the hose and the air still coming out, like
Yeah,
sizzling as it comes out. And you couple that with the stoic look on Harrelson's face, and it's just a phenomenal moment of visual and audio kind of working together there.
for sure. And I especially like the human drama of him pulling up that hose and kind of deciding, I'm just going to turn off the air to it because there's no
Oh
point
yeah.
this
Yeah.
air going anymore. But like he
Yeah.
has that hesitation of like, well, what if I turn it off and I never get to turn it back on, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I think it's really great. I mean, my only nitpicks or criticisms of the film really come down to I do think these characters are thinly veiled. We don't really know too much about them, but the documentary, this is what happened, like elements of the film as we've been talking about is so good that I was certainly willing to overlook that here. I do think some of the and I slight spoilers here, I guess, or even major spoilers. Just spoiler alert, just in general, I guess. It is a true story, so you can go and look it up. But there is a moment when they get when they get Chris's body and they bring it back into the bell. The immediate aftermath, like from a humanization perspective, I think that is handled quite well. The sequence on the whole, though, I do think is a little clunky. It
Yeah,
is a little weird. I don't think the editing there is all that sharp, but I still like the emotion it's going for. The, as you called it earlier, the kind of the man tears that it's kind of invoking. I like what it's going for. I think the execution is just a little off there.
yeah, for sure. I think it follows a lot of um, things that we're seeing in cinema today, where the final reveal or the final like, yes, he's alive, is drawn out so much that
Yeah.
you kind of have a question in your mind of, oh, is he going to survive? Is he?
Yeah.
If you don't know the story. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, it's like, yeah, of course he's going to survive. So just get on with it, guys.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little drawn out and a little again, it's a little movie-fied for sure. And there is an element, at least based off of what I know about it, that he did have some sort of immediate response where I think there was some CPR, but he was able to breathe pretty immediately. He did have some consciousness. So like it's not terribly far off from what I read and watched as far as what the real story is, but it's just it's contrived in a way that feels a little overcooked, I think.
Yeah.
But I still like emotively what they're kind of going for there. And it is kind of like, and I think maybe the other disappointment, I use that term loosely, but I think where the film, I think, could have realized that moment a little bit more is to maybe less focus on the tension of is he alive or not, because we do know that he's going to come back, and instead focus more on the insanity that he survived this.
Yeah.
because, and they do tell us this in the end credits, like scientists to this day do not understand fully why he lived. Like, I think giving a little time to that would have maybe been compelling. Like, how on earth are you still alive? Like, that is crazy.
Yeah. I could,
Um,
you almost want a scene with like the ship's doctor where he just keeps, testing his
yeah,
sensors or something and saying, what's going on? What makes you
yeah,
different? Yeah.
yeah. And I do wonder if maybe there's something on the cutting room floor. I don't know. I was honestly a little surprised because so much of the film is docu style that it doesn't skip elements that a lot of these films tend to do, in the sense that, like, we're going down, we're showing you the details. So he has to not only just retrieve the body, he's got to unhook the thing from the structure. We got to hook him to the line. We got to climb up. And in a lot of other movies, there would simply be an edit. Once we see David reach the bell, there would just be a cut to the three of them inside. But
Mhm.
no, that's not what this film does, because he put so much energy in just getting to the bell that he also had to lift Chris onto the platform. And
Yeah.
he's struggling to show him getting into the platform. They have to push him up into the bell, like, because he's dead weight at this point. So, like, the film doesn't edit out any of that. It shows us every step of the way, that to then kind of, once they get to the bell and he's alive and we're gonna survive this. I am a little surprised they didn't go to a scene like that, because that feels like the next logical step, but they
Yeah.
did kind of overlook that here.
Yeah.
But
It's definitely like a process film. Like they like to show you
yes,
exactly each step of how things work. And I think, what you were talking about with how long it takes for him to get back into the bell, that might have been, the heightening of the emotion too, of us saying, okay, this is a real guy, he's got to be revived. And he's
yeah,
not in a space where he can do it himself.
yeah,
I think that goes to the scenes where, he's running out of air and they're cutting between him and the message that his fiance is leaving him. That kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
attempting to interject a little bit of the empathy that we need to be feeling for him in that moment.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's where I in some ways I kind of wanted more of that. I also feel like if you cut all of that out of the film, it wouldn't have changed a lot of the movie, because what you
Right.
get, like, those two scenes at the beginning. And look, again, like, from a humanistic standpoint, it is effective. It does give us some insight into Chris and those final moments that he would have been experiencing there. I totally understand why it's here. Um, I wish maybe, like, this isn't a terribly long movie. It's 93 minutes.
Mhm.
I think they could have added 20 minutes to this movie.
Yeah.
I think there was room to really let those characters breathe a little bit more, or especially Chris's relationship with his fiance, let that kind of foster a little bit more. Um, I don't know if it was a budget thing or not. I mean, this was only made for $23 million. That doesn't seem like a whole lot by
Yeah.
today's money. That is a fairly low budget. So that could be part of it. But I mean, given what this film is and what it's attempting to do, I can overlook those things. I think where its strengths lie, it actually is quite good. And when there's a lot of other films coming out around this time, the other film that we're talking about this week is Scott Derrickson's The Gorge. Uh, no bueno. That film, not good. Like, Last Breath is Citizen Kane comparatively to that movie. Okay, so, like, given the state of affairs at the moment, this is a breath of fresh air, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot to like about this movie, and a dumping ground where, you don't get a lot of great movies this
Mhm.
time of year. But I enjoyed this one. I look forward to catching it on TNT in about 2 months. you know,
Yeah, it's definitely one that, in spite of myself, because you see the trailer and you're like, oh, really, this again, this
yeah,
kind of thing. But
uh-huh.
it kept
Yeah,
my and
no,
and I think you were right. Like that 93 minutes, that is nice because we get so many movies now that push to the 2 hours that don't need to, or that
mm,
even push to an hour 45 and they really don't need to. But this one, it worked its runtime the best it could and kept
mhm,
it really nice. One weird thing that stuck with me that they never go back to, but they like specifically show it, is when they're originally at the manifold and he drops his wrench, and like they show it falling to the, but they never come back to it. And so I was like, I wonder what happened to that wrench.
I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know. Maybe there was something on the cutting room floor. I don't know.
Maybe.
That is, I didn't even think about that till you just brought that up. But yeah, interesting decision there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it though. I mean, it definitely has its blemishes for sure, but a lot to really like here for sure. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, like I think you nailed it. It's a movie that kind of, you're right. It's just a good cable movie that you could just turn
Mm,
on and get into and
mm.
not even think about.
Yeah, and it only made, at least what I'm looking at here, it's only made $8 million at the box office so far. Now it's only been a week. Perhaps it will have some legs. I don't really know. But like when I look at these numbers, it suggests to me, especially given that it's February and this is just how it works these days, Last Breath is going to be rentable in probably a week's time. So you could just rent it in another week or wait for it on cable in 2 months. It's worth watching if you have 90 minutes and want to give it a go. I was surprised by the film because, like you, I didn't really care for the marketing. It didn't really sell me on this all that much, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
I would definitely catch it on TNT when it comes out. But yeah, at any rate, that is Last Breath. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Zach, thanks so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks, JD.
Normally, this is where I would say, where can people follow you on social media? But as we stated, you're not there. you have a better life than most of us do.
I do have a letterbox though, so you can always.
Oh yeah, go follow you on Letterboxd then. Yeah.
Watching. I kind of made myself a pact this year of if I go see like a 2025 release, I'm going to write at least a couple of sentences on there.
Yeah.
Usually
Nice.
don't review stuff on there, but I'll do that. And then whatever I post on InSession or somewhere else, I'll put a link just so people can see my writing.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and you can always catch Zach at InSessionFilm.com. I love your writing, love your work. It's always fantastic. So I really, really do appreciate your work there, my friend. And where can we find you on Letterboxd?
I'm at Z Youngs 108.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so go and give him a follow there. That's usually how I like to do it as well. I love to just write a little blurb. If I feel inspired, sometimes it'll be a few paragraphs, but I always like to write a little something there for everything that I do. Always fun. Even if sometimes I'm weeks late on it, I can get behind on Letterboxd a lot.
Yeah.
I blame that on my kids, but it's still fun. I love Letterboxd. It's one of my faves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with all that said, go and give Zach a follow there on Letterboxd. As I noted earlier in the conversation, we will have a second review coming out this week as well. We will talk about The Gorge, and oh boy, a doozy of a conversation. So you can be on the lookout for that. Also, check out episode 626, where we, of course, talked about the Oscars, those pesky Oscars. We talked about that, and we continued our Best Picture movie series with 1961's West Side Story, which was a lovely, lovely conversation. Chasing the Gold, New episode of Chasing Gold this week, and there'll be a new Women in Session as well. So as always, a busy week. With that said, thanks, Zach, for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Be sure to subscribe to the show, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you listen. We really do appreciate everyone subscribing and tuning in each and every week. With that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.